From the Penn Institute for Urban Research and the Volcker Alliance, this is Special Briefing. I'm Bill Glasgall, and I'm here today to talk about AI in government with our co-host, Penn IUR co-director Susan Wachter. Hello, Susan.
Hi, Bill. A fast transforming area. Looking forward to today's conversation.
You bet. And just in case you in the audience were wondering, we're the real Susan and Bill, not bots dreamed up by ChatGPT. I can certify that. And we humans have a lot to talk about today because since ChatGPT burst onto the scene in 2022, we've seen what the folks at Capital Economics call an artificial intelligence arms race in the US and abroad, with trillions of dollars in investment and stock market value on the line. How this impacts the productivity and the 18 million strong workforce of state and local governments is the subject at hand today, and our expert panel is primed and ready. But first, this word. Special briefings are made possible by funding from the Travelers Institute, the Volcker Alliance, and members of the Penn IUR Advisory Board. We're coming to you live on the Penn IUR and Volcker Alliance websites, and also on the Special Briefing podcast and Penn IUR YouTube channel. And as usual, we've taken your questions in advance. They're great ones, and with good reason. Because just like in the private sector, various AI-driven applications are springing up organically in government. For example, bots to improve customer service phone lines, identify problems, and help navigate the building permit process. Or San Francisco police using AI to look for connections between seemingly unrelated incidents. Hello, Harry Bosch in LA. Or the New York MTA deploying AI-enabled cell phones to spot subway track defects. And a teaser for what you'll be hearing lots about today, the birth of digital twins. And so to explain all this, let's introduce today's amazing panel. For the big picture, we'll turn first to John Hartley of the Hoover Institution and University of Texas at Austin. By the way, John has a new paper on AI online, which we'll make available by link here. And after John, we'll turn to Leigh Palmer, Vice President at Google Public Sector. Leigh recently wrote that her job is to bring cloud and AI technologies, security, and scale to the mission of the government to transform the way citizens experience public services and the way agencies operate. How about that for ambitious? Following Leigh, we'll get some real-life case studies. This is the show don't tell department, real-life case studies from a trio of top pros, Columbus, Ohio City Auditor and Muni bond maven, Megan Kilgore, Penn Water Center Executive Director Howard Neukrug, who just launched an AI initiative, by the way, and lastly, Texas A&M Urban Planning Professor and AI author Tom Sanchez. Welcome to you all. And Susan, let's get things underway with our first guest.
Yes, it's my great pleasure to introduce John Hartley, who is at the Hoover Institution at Stanford. And among other things, we're very proud to claim him as a former Wharton MBA and a co-author of paper with me, so where I can see his brilliance. Up-and-coming economist, and the paper that he has just written with co-authors has looked at the labor impacts of artificial intelligence, transformative generative artificial intelligence. Jonathan, tell us about the big picture.
Well, Susan, thank you so much for having me. Honored to be here. Honored to be back at Wharton virtually here. So really, thank you for having me. It's a real honor. I mean, I don't think anyone here has avoided hearing about generative AI in some way, and so I think it's such a an amazing time that we're living through, and it's exciting to see it happen all around us. So by background, just in terms of what we're doing with this paper, I'm a big data person. I'm an empirical economist, and part of what I like to do is to put some numbers on these sorts of issues. And so, for a long time, I think a lot of folks had maybe heard these stats that 40% of jobs will be automated by X year or something like that. All these forecasts about generative AI. which I think we're maybe a little early in terms of trying to put any sort of numbers on things, so maybe admirable. What my co-authors and I decided to do is just to start running some surveys in the American public that are nationally representative and just asking people, do you use generative AI at work? And so what we've been doing is we've been doing this for the past year. And as it turns out, as of the end of September, about 37% of American workers claim to be using generative AI at work. For some reason, often this is maybe just a few hours, a couple hours a week. And then they put something into a prompt and they go back to doing whatever they were doing before, and they sort of use these to help them in their tasks. Now, this 37%. It's actually up pretty substantively from at the end of last year, which was around 30%. And remember, these tools only came out at the end of 2022, so not too long ago. They've only been around for just a few years. What is interesting is the use of these tools actually was even higher and plateaued at the end of September. And so there's some suggestions that there may be some sort of a pullback on adoption of these tools. Some of this, there's other surveys. You don't just trust us, but there's other surveys being run by the U.S. Census that are asking firms, are your workers using generative AI tools? And also we have data from companies like Ramp. So it seems like, one, there was a massive surge at the beginning of this year. The number of ChatGPT users doubled somewhere between March and April. And then for some reason, over the summer and September, there was a bit of a slowdown. Still trying to understand that. It seems like it's amongst large firms that people have slowed down some of their use, but that could also just be a small bump in the road. We don't know fully what's driving these things. Now, what we also do is we compare this data to actual, one, we can look at particular occupations and see what occupations are more exposed to using generative AI at work, according to our survey measures. And what we can do is we can look at official data on the number of jobs, or the number of job openings or wages, and we can sort of look at those, what's happening to these jobs or these occupations that are more exposed to generative AI tools. And as it turns out, so far, it's not totally clear that there's been a massive impact when it comes to either pay, whether it comes to job openings, whether it comes to the total number of jobs. There have been a couple papers recently that have come out by my Stanford friend, Eric Brynjolfsson, and some of his co-authors that find some small negative effects, and that's really concentrated amongst young people. So there's some suggestions that maybe young entry-level people are being negatively affected. But I think what's important to also look at sort of the bigger picture is, if you look at some of our survey questions, when people are being asked how you're using these tools at work, the majority of people who we ask say that they're using these tools at work to complement their existing work. So they're helping them get their tasks done more quickly. They're not totally replacing their job or getting their entire task done altogether. Now, of course, there's certain particular occupations. I think people in customer service that have been disrupted very much so. I'm sure some people that spend a lot of time just doing writing. I'm sure that there's those sorts of occupations have been disrupted pretty directly. But so far, I think it's still a TBD in terms of what the overall labor market impact is going to be. But I think we're just in some of the early innings of what's a much longer baseball game. That would be sort of the overall takeaway that I would give.
Well, thank you very much, John. Early innings for sure. Leigh, you're on the forefront of early innings in the public sector. Give us the big picture there.
Thank you, Susan. It's so exciting to be back at Penn. Especially fun fact, Dr. Wachter was one of my professors when I was at Penn. So thinking about AI and how you prepare for AI in the public sector, everybody thinks about AI in terms of the models, and the models are improving at a rapid pace. In fact, we just released our new Gemini model, Gemini 3, this week. But we like to think about it in terms of you really need to prepare for a full stack when you're thinking about getting an organization or a department ready for AI. And what we mean by that is is first, the bottom layer of the stack is really the infrastructure and the compute power that you're going to need in order to power whatever tools it is that you are deploying to your environment. So that can be GPUs from NVIDIA that you hear so much about in the press, or in the Google perspective, we also have our own chips called TPUs. The second part of the stack is really where the magic is going to start to happen, and that's the data and analytics. So many public agencies have their data locked away in silos, or their data is spread across things like PowerPoint presentations, Excel spreadsheets, Word documents, whatever it may be. So that's really where AI can unlock some of the magic. The next of the stack is, of course, the models that you may use. So, with Google, it's Gemini, but, there are other models out there. And I'd say different models have, different capabilities. Then you have the platform, which is how you may access those models. So you may access them through your collaboration tools. You may access them through APIs or through the web. And then finally, the pointy end of the spear, where people are really interacting with these tools, is the agents and the applications. What you may be putting into a prompt in a chatbot, for example. That's where the interface with a citizen may happen. So in Google, we are really working with public sector customers on multiple fronts. So it may be something like a chatbot. So for example, with the Chicago Transit Authority, a chatbot that would provide timely information to a citizen on, when is the train coming, when is the next bus coming, to working with institutes like AI2, where we're doing custom models, where you might want to build a custom model for a very specific purpose, a very specific research purpose. Illinois and the Department of Human Services, where it's intake portals. So it's those citizen services to be more efficient with a citizen service, being able to do an intake, maybe doing on-the-fly language translation, to multiple languages to help a citizen access services more seamlessly. And then there are also things like New York Cyber and looking at, cyber defense and, how do I use AI to more quickly get on top of, cyber threats that may be coming into our agency. So we're just at the tip of the iceberg on the potential for this technology, and we're really excited to partner with our customers in this industry on how to make things as efficient as possible.
And transferring knowledge from the fast uptakers to perhaps the slower uptakers.
Yes.
So you're in a great position to help for that knowledge transformation to occur. And in terms of talking about fast uptakers, turn back to you, Bill, who will introduce our next speaker.
Well, thanks, and we'll return to John and Leigh later in the program. When I found when you want to know something about what a state or a city is really doing, you turn to the auditor or the controller, because they have their eyes and ears everywhere. Their job definition very often is big picture and summarizing it all in financial documents. So that's why Megan is so really such a valuable public servant. Megan has been a great resource for us at Volcker and Penn on the ins and outs of the Financial Data Transparency Act, and also on financial accounting and marrying that with operations. So Megan, tell us what's going on in Columbus and what's going on in your office, especially as how AI is creeping into to daily life.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. Susan, grateful to be here. And to your point, Bill, I come to this conversation from really those two vantage points, both as the city auditor, basically overseeing the entire revenue side of the city of Columbus for one of the fastest growing cities in America as well, where we're absolutely seeing AI's impact on our revenues holistically to our Columbus economy, bearing in mind that we're 80% backed by income tax revenues. So how people work, we can absolutely see in our revenues, our labor force, and also the way that the residents interact with our systems. Secondly, as a leader of a large, very financially and technology forward office, we've embraced modernization for years. And so I guess in other words, I see AI both in numbers and in the workforce behind those numbers. And so maybe, let's start with that. As an employer, I have found that our office's future workforce, and I've used this terminology and it's kind of stuck. We need more goats, not sheep, meaning people in government, our workers, that's people that we're hiring right now who are curious. They're inquisitive, they're courageous and willing to climb, that's the goat part, into unfamiliar terrain as frankly technology reshapes how we're constantly working and ultimately serving the public. As an example, when I first came into office, we've done an incredible amount of modernization since I came in. We really, as a simple example, we employed individuals whose entire job, no discredit, this was a very important job at the time, but they opened up envelopes, they opened up tax returns and manually keyed in those tax returns. You could imagine, one tax return, just think about this in terms of a hierarchy. One tax return would ultimately go to 8 different people in 8 different steps. Today, our systems actually read real handwriting and hands lock boxes, even handwriting as messy as mine, with speed and accuracy. And so that's an example of shift that we're seeing, but it's happening really everywhere in my office. So what I forecast, if you will, and what I tell my students, I teach as an adjunct at the Glenn College at Ohio State, is that I believe this is a beautiful confluence where public sector workers, who are frankly going to be working in an AI-shaped era should not be passive. Instead, they're going to be frankly able to lead if they're exploring, if they're questioning, if they're able to adapt. Second big probably takeaway that I've seen, and this is more at the governmental budgeting level, is that we're still a bit in the past where budgeting is more around roads, concrete, facilities. And I believe we have to have a transformation where we need to view building human infrastructure as well as investing in forward-thinking AI technology. It needs to be considered on the same level of vitality as investing in that traditional form of hard infrastructure. And maybe to that, even equally as important, governments have to start investing in the skills necessary to allow our public sector leaders and our workers here to really use those tools well. So that's data literacy, ethical reasoning, creative problem solving. I do not believe AI by any stretch is going to replace public service, but instead I do believe it will absolutely redefine it. So maybe third, governments, in my opinion, really have this incredible ability, and this is the biggest thing that and how it's affected me. We can see ourselves more clearly than we ever have. We have better data. We have more ability to use that data to actually tell a story. We built a fiscal twin here of our economy, which could not have come at a better time given the shutdown and that lack of data. So what we can do, especially with an income tax powered economy, is we can actually use our twin to think about, well, what if we invest $1,000 here for something like workforce development for a type of job that we forecast to be really important in the next 3 to 10 years. Back that up with upskilling through our community colleges, and we can tangibly see, bearing in mind that we're an income tax driven economy, we can tangibly see that investment come back to us very quickly because our tax base grows upward and we have really clear ROI. So, only really because of AI have I personally experienced that clarity. And so from where I sit, probably as a CFO, I'm definitely a technologist, and as a large, office employer, AI has not been about fewer workers for us. It's been about exactly the opposite. We now have more information, more data, and we need to figure out more how to employ folks to help us make sense of it.
And Megan, I think you just one quick follow-up. I think you mentioned when we were chatting before the program that that opening and reading the mail and the returns task, that's not done in your office anymore. That's you've outsourced that to someone, right?
We have. What we looked for was what is the technology that makes our processes the most expedient, accurate, and so forth. But just imagine that ROI, it's not just about outsourcing. Instead of having those 8 separate steps of a tax return that would otherwise maybe take quite a bit of time for those funds to come into our coffers, the technology now gets those funds into our system, into our investment portfolio very quickly. So there are a lot of positive benefits to that. That does not mean those employees were let go by any stretch. It just means those employees have simply a different job today.
So just
Got
to
it.
put an underline on this,
Yeah.
entry-level workers are you're less looking to hire them. Is that true, Megan?
It would be very different skills. You know, the office that we were several years ago looks very, very, very different today. So I would say it's less about, you know, kind of where one is, because it's more about we're absolutely looking for certain entry-level employment if that is what we need today. But what we need today, I kind of forecast in 2 to 3 years, we're going to be already changing.
You know, I told you at the beginning that you'd hear something about digital twins. We just heard about one set of digital twins. We'll hear others as we proceed today. But first, a quick word. This is a reminder. You're tuned into special briefing from Penn IUR and the Volcker Alliance. Thanks again to the Travelers Institute, the Volcker Alliance, and members of the Penn IUR Advisory Board for your support. And don't forget, you can follow the archived editions of today's episode and all of our other special briefings on our websites, the Special Briefing Podcast, and the Penn IUR YouTube channel. And now, enough of that. Let's cross the Penn campus, actually go down the street to his home office and hear from Howard Neukrug. Howard, you're the executive director of the Penn Water Center. You've been a friend of this program since the start. You've got a new AI initiative. So tell us about that and how this fits into the lives of the government sector and the private sector that you work with as well.
Well, thank you, Bill and Susan, for inviting me today. As you said, I'm the founder and executive director of the Water Center at Penn, and just to give you some background on that, we're dedicated to creating sustainable, resilient water systems. That's both natural freshwater systems like lakes and rivers and wetlands, and also our engineered infrastructure of our urban cities, our drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater systems. We have a keen focus on today's political, climate, and economic uncertainties. And we do this by looking at modernizing water policies and practices and accelerating the adoption of next generation technologies and infrastructure. And as a clear part of this mission, the Water Center recently launched, as you mentioned, the Water AI Nexus Center of Excellence, where our founding collaborators are the Water Environment Federation, Amazon, and the leading utilities of the world. The Water AI Center of Excellence is a first of its kind initiative to bring together leaders in AI and sustainable water management to drive equitable, groundbreaking solutions for both we call water for AI, which means how do we minimize water use in AI data centers, and also AI for water, leveraging AI to tackle these critical water challenges that we are facing. We serve as a neutral convener, bridging academic rigor and technology expertise and community-focused research to ensure AI delivers tangible benefits. What do we mean by water for AI? Well, data centers generate an awful lot of heat, and water cooling is preferred over air cooling because it uses less energy and it's less expensive. And this constrains local supplies, especially in drought-prone regions. And we don't really know the future chip design and cooling innovations and how this will alter this water demand. And our goal is really to achieve net zero or even net positive water using all different types of technologies, cooling technologies, strategic siting of data centers, and even interesting ideas like capturing and reusing the waste heat from these data centers for district heating or other applications. These data centers can also invest in replenishment projects such as rainwater capture or watershed restoration to offset their withdrawals. And the bottom line is that today, data centers growth today is like the Wild West, fast moving, largely unregulated. Our goal is to work with local communities to ensure that data centers fully explore all available strategies to achieve or at least move forward toward net zero water use. And this, of course, is very difficult today because of there's not much accurate information available because it's proprietary data. It's variable with climate and operational practices of the different companies that are involved. And there's a as we all know, a rapid evolution of AI workloads and cooling technologies. So when we say how do we use AI to the advantage of the water sector, we're looking at things like real-time data for sensors that come from sensors, from weather forecasts, from infrastructure. And we use this to optimize water systems for things like greenhouse gas reduction, energy consumption, or prevent water losses. And it can be used to design new water infrastructure, new technologies. It can predict water demand, equipment performance, system stress. There's so many different opportunities that we have in front of us. And AI also enables autonomous operation of complex systems, such as smart irrigation or wastewater treatment. And as you mentioned, Bill, AI-powered digital twins can simulate entire water networks, helping planners test new technologies virtually before real-world deployment, saving time and resources. And of course, AI can help us with continuous improvement. The question before us is really about the workforce implications. We really don't know where we're headed with our workforce as AI becomes more prominent. But as a tool, we see it augmenting, not replacing the public sector workforce. Particularly, most important is people like me who are at the end of our careers and the amount of knowledge that we've accumulated over time, and how do we use AI to provide that knowledge management over to the next generations of water leaders, upskilling and creating new roles for data science, systems integration, cybersecurity, digital infrastructure, so many things that we're looking to take. And there will be obviously reductions in routine tasks that will be automated, but there are incredible opportunities for new jobs and looking towards the future. And we're hoping to partner with universities and vocational programs because we know that's going to be critical, and particularly small utilities. And there are 52,000 water utilities in the United States. And many of the smaller ones have struggled to attract this kind of AI talent. And therefore, we're going to see a growth in regional AI hubs to avoid this widening gaps. So with that, I'll pass it back over to you, Bill, and look forward to speaking to you further about this.
That's great. I'm going to hand it off to Susan. The idea of a digital Howard is really, really interesting. I think digital twins is one of the coolest developments I have ever seen. Susan, why don't you get back into the planning world?
Digital Howard, and for now, real Howard. We'll come back to you with some questions about the specifics of the potential in water. But now for big picture of the potential in urban planning, we turn to Tom Sanchez, who is professor of urban planning at Texas A&M and a planets and columnist on this topic and the author of a new book on this. Tom?
Yes, thank you, Susan. I think, some very fascinating things happening in the urban planning world, and even kind of beyond that. I think when we're talking about AI, the interesting part of that is looking at the AI in the city, embedded in the city, where we're using sensors, we're monitoring activity, and then using capturing that information, and in some cases using it real time. Kind of distinguished from how are we using that information to plan for cities or to look to the future. And so I think AI really offers some great opportunities to do that in terms of the information that we're able to capture, being able to make predictions, being able to integrate data across agencies, across departments, and over time, and something that Howard mentioned on the knowledge management part, when we look at the history and changes and even, all of the dynamics in urban areas, and these AI tools are helping us to manage that. I've been working with the American Planning Association, which is the professional organization for urban planners in the U.S., and they've been doing some fantastic work around considering upskilling for planners. What do we need to know about these technologies? If we're going to incorporate them into our practices, and so we're working along with them, publishing some reports, and then my book that had come out on AI and planning from that recently. And really my focus has been at how do we inform planners about how they can use these tools on a day-to-day basis. And so, things like, terminology, basic concepts, case studies, because it will be, I think, the individual planner, the individual kind of worker, practitioner that will decide the appropriateness of these tools based on what they're doing. And so that difference between kind of analyzing data, making a projection, or are they working with the community and trying to increase community involvement onto even more sophisticated applications, like what has been mentioned with the digital twins. And I think that, and I'm also working with the American Planning Association on a digital twin and kind of introducing planners to some of those tools. But that being, a visual kind of simulation or representation of urban areas and kind of all of these systems that are involved, and how can we replicate that in a model so that we can do some what if scenarios? What if we put in a big development in a particular area? What if we do build these big data centers in a particular part of our metropolitan area? What does that do to water supply? What does that do to energy rates? What does that, how does that affect employment? How does it, environmental impact, social, economic, whatever it might be? And so we've got some very sophisticated tools based on AI coming together in order to do or improve, hopefully, our methods within planning. I think one of the biggest impacts within planning and, for planning practitioners and on the profession, and kind of, who's going to be doing the work and the changeover of the field is in generative AI. And so planners generate a lot of text. We do a lot of communications. We do a lot of analysis. We think about different scenarios, and we're seeing that these tools help, with doing that and drawing on large databases and knowledge across lots of different cities, not just our own, but how can we build these scenarios, communicate them to our stakeholders, and then hopefully get feedback and get that back into the planning process for decision making. So lots of very interesting things happening kind of in the city, and for those that are trying to plan the city and the stakeholders, certainly. And like several others have mentioned so far, we're still at the kind of at the beginning of a lot of this, and we don't know exactly what the overall impacts are going to be, but we know there are going to be some, and I think fairly significant in terms of workforce in these areas. And because we planners like to think that everything is related to planning and everything is related to cities and the places that we live, this will have kind of reverberating impacts into related disciplines and fields. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Tom.
Susan, can I just interrupt for one second? I know you're going to kick off the Q&A, but I got one really quick follow-up for Tom. When we were talking again before the show, I think you mentioned that you're working with the city of Dallas on a project which sounded kind of interesting. Can you tell us a little about that?
Well, we've been discussing with them, and this came up too, about the use of chatbots or AI technologies to help answer questions. So things like call centers, and things like being able to communicate about to large numbers of people that have questions about what the city is doing, regulations, guidelines, laws, things like that. And the city of Dallas they have to field 100,000 phone calls a year into their call center. And when you think about what's involved with that in terms of people answering those calls, looking up the information, and then being able to respond quickly and accurately, I think this is one area where we can see, and again, back to this knowledge management idea. This is where AI, I think, can be very helpful.
Well, Susan,
Yes,
the floor is yours again. Thank you, Tom.
No problem. A number of questions, and that example does actually provoke a question I have based on today's conversation. But I'm going to go to the questions we've gotten from you, the audience. We thank you for them. To start with, when AI automates administrative functions, what metrics should governments and do governments use to determine whether the administrative function is actually improved? Let's start with you, Megan. How do you know that things are better?
All right. How do we know that things are better? I think the core question is this: did it actually improve a resident's lived reality? Did it improve our knowledge? We have all kinds of metrics, and I think it's important.
So give us some examples, Megan, of what those metrics are.
It's from a revenue standpoint, we have a number of ways to measure how our economy is performing, but I'm going to give you something that's very timely that we could not have done but for AI. When Doge began, and we just bear in mind, we're a capital city with not only gargantuan employment driven by federal funding, but also as a city, we've received hundreds of millions of dollars directly, right? We were asked, and we have a number of colleagues on from the rating agencies today, we were asked, well, what is your exposure? Just think about all the jobs that are not directly called out, but money that go to universities for employment that come from federal dollars. It was so hard to track. And so what we did is we actually created a pretty visual, it's a beautiful Tableau, Power BI powered dashboard where we looked at the direct impacts. But this is what I want to share with you. We actually took all of the same words that Doge was using to look at grants, and we dropped into an LLM all of the city's grants and looked for those same words to be able to create a hierarchy of one, scored 1, which was very much at risk, all the way down to a score of 5, which was pretty much not. That was shared with the rating agencies, and that was an awesome feeling of knowledge that we would not have had otherwise.
So thank you, Megan. I'm going to turn to you, Leigh, on the same question, and then others please weigh in. But before I do so, what I'm getting from today's conversation is excitement about the potential. And I do want to make sure that we don't skip over not just this huge potential, which is actually happening in many places, but also kind of the more everyday, almost pedestrian use in, for example, customer relations management, which we know is in the private sector, has taken over, AI has. And customer relation management is very big for public sector. So, Leigh, can you give us some metrics that perhaps you use to say to local governments, take this technology because it will have this measurable impact?
Yeah, so I think metrics are really important. And I also think metrics are personal. And what I mean by that is the metrics are going to be, different for, the agency, the government, the, situation that you're in, right? And so we definitely work with customers on, how to best measure, kind of an effectiveness of a tool. But I wouldn't say there is a one size fits all. And what I mean by that is there are, if you're thinking about a benefit system or a grant system, right? There's both the, speed metric, how fast can you get, dollars out the door or dollars in, whatever it may be, like Megan was just speaking to. There's also a quality aspect to it, especially if you're, thinking about implementing a system that, may be reducing fraud, right? Fraud, waste, and abuse, or something like that. And then, kind of what you were getting at, Susan, is the human aspect of it, of human toil, like end job, kind of satisfaction, right? Can you get some of these human toil, heavy data entry, things out of the system so that a human can then do what a human is best at, which is, reasoning and analytics, right? As opposed to, having to enter data in a system. So I think, when we start working, kind of like with a, how are you going to show that the system is effective? You have to kind of consider all of these when you're putting something in play. I have some examples of places where we were working with agencies with analytics, where they said, we were able to only get to 10% of our data, and now we can get to 90% of our data when we're looking at analytics and what we need to bring into a system to think about, what decisions can we make and how can we make decisions faster.
Let me ask I got a related question, which is, it's a bit of a jump ball, but I'd like to start with.
Bill, before you go there, can I go to John Hartley on asking the same question, because he has some actual.
Oh, okay.
I believe on time saved. Maybe they're kind of narrowly, but tell us about the numbers that you see in your survey and in the literature more generally.
Yeah. So one, I mean, we see massive amounts of time being saved. And one, I mean, for many, for people that are so conditional on using generative AI to complete a task, like roughly 2/3 of the time that would traditionally be dedicated to tasks being saved. I mean,
let me just underline that. You say 2/3 of the time is saved.
That's conditional on using it to use it. So not all tasks are used.
No, conditional on use.
That's right.
For those
that
are being used.
Exactly. So it's pretty amazing in terms of just the overall time saved. And what's even more amazing is that if you then sort of look at time savings by income category, the people that are benefiting the most productivity-wise in terms of these sort of these time savings are people in the lowest income brackets. And that's, I think, probably one of the most promising results, at least that we've seen in our sites and looking at some of the effects of this.
So the productivity impact is particularly on these lower skilled jobs, which can be automated perhaps by AI more easily. I'm sorry, Bill, to have interrupted you.
No, that's okay. Quick comment and then a question. I think a lot of the surveys on generative AI use don't fully reflect the amount of use that's going on. If you're shopping at Amazon, whether you're in the purchasing department at the City of Columbus or here in my living room, first thing I see is an AI summary of the reviews. The same with Home Depot, Walmart. I now get AI summaries of my email and my texts delivered somehow through the Apple mobile OS. It's quite extraordinary. So you're using it without even thinking you're using it, which then gets me to the question. Maybe start with John and then certainly Megan, but go across the board. We've had a bunch of questions from the audience on upskilling existing workers, existing employees for our new world, or reskilling. And then the next question is, how do we train people coming out of community colleges, public policy and administration programs at universities, especially all the state universities? How do we get people ready for this new for this new job market? And are we, is there a mismatch? John, give us the big picture, and then let's go across the board. And Megan, certainly, because you're teaching at John Glenn.
So first and foremost, I think we do need to overhaul our federal training programs. So for those that are familiar with this sort of policy area, going back to the 1960s, we had the Great Society, job sort of training programs, and so think things like Job Corps and so forth. These things have sort of been renewed or reauthorized over the years, and most recently with something called WIOA, WIOA. And as it turns out, that there have been a lot of empirical studies done on some of those historical training programs. And it turns out that the current versions of those, which haven't been updated very much since the 1960s, don't do a whole lot. They basically in terms of the value add that they provide, they're really not worth much more than their cost. So it's basically zero, essentially zero or very little value add. But the same way, there have been these studies, these randomized controlled trials that have been done by folks like Larry Katz and others at Harvard, Raj Chetty and others, that basically find that if you train people to do things like code, that's obviously one particular sector, that has pretty positive savings. So I think reincorporating those insights into a WIOA reform bill, I think, which I think there would be a bipartisan desire to do so, and there is bipartisan desire to do so. These things, I'm not saying anything that's new here, and these things are have been debated for quite some time. Hopefully, I think that would be a positive value add. I mean, there is some question about the college wage premium. That's I think a massive question right now. If you look at the average wage of a college graduate and compare that to the average wage of someone with no college or some college, that massive gap has been contracting. And so I think there is a big question right now about the value of a college education. What kind of reforms can we do to improve a college education to actually ensure that people are getting the skills that they need? So I think these are big questions. I don't have the exact, I think the best answers, but I think these are the questions that we need to be asking.
So John, thank you, John, and we'll go to the others. I want to take what you said and go in two different directions with the questions for others, which is what you just said is that, and I know this is in the literature, that job training for specific skills appears to work as opposed to more basic. However, with things changing so fast, isn't that almost a contradiction? Because what specifics? Or the bigger question is, so what should we be training for? And so that's for everyone. And the next question, again for everyone, is at what level should this training occur? Should it occur in community colleges, in universities? Should it occur on the job? So who would like to start with that? Either one. What kind of training and where? Who should take it on?
Well, I'd like to respond to that a little bit, Susan. I think there are a few of us on the call that remember when personal computers were introduced to education and the workplace. How did that happen? And in that case, that was actually infrastructure that had to, be supplied, be hooked up, training on how to use this machine as well as the applications. And so that happened, I think, incrementally, where we had different users within a business had to get trained or upskilled a lot faster than others. But ultimately, everybody gained that knowledge on how to use that tool. And now,
you're saying it happened informally to some degree. Let's go to Leigh on that, because it's not just hardware but software. And how do you get everyone trained on the software you're putting?
Yeah, so Tom had his hand up, so I was going to jump in, but I wanted to have him be able to go first. But to answer your question, Susan, I don't think it's either or. I don't think it's students or on the job or, a formal program. I think it's all of the above. I think you have to do it all of the above. So, for example, we have many initiatives get to students early and often, right? Get them familiar, used to the tools.
Be more specific. How early?
So, for example, our Gemini for Students offer, any student has access to our Gemini.
At a college level?
College level, yeah, college level. Has access to our Gemini tools to be able to start using them, in their daily lives. My daughter is in college right now, and she uses it to help her create tests and exams to study, right? So, just get these, I don't want to call her a child, but, get people used to it, early and often. On the same token, there is, get these tools inserted in, the workforce as it is today. So another example is we have partnerships like within my state, the state of Virginia, which are AI certification programs, right? So, for free in partnership with the state, be able to go through, whether it's level 100, 200, 300, depending on, what your needs may be for your job.
May I just stop here for a sec? How long has this AI certification been in place?
We announced that partnership, I want to say maybe 4 to 6 months ago.
So very recent. I have to look up the exact date. Is leading on this, or are there other states also?
I think there's other states too. I can look up the data and send it out to the Google VA, Virginia AI partnership and certifications. Yes. But my point is that you need a combination of both, right? Training a workforce, right, to either use tools in the future or use tools in their jobs today, and getting.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but again, the certification that happening in Virginia can happen at community college level.
Yes. So, and I'll get the link of it when I'm off. I'll try to find it right now and send it out, through the chat.
Terrific, thank you. So, again, do you have any thoughts on training? I'm sure you do on right there as you hire folks. Tell us about that.
Absolutely, but the most important training for me has not been about training employees for technical skills or qualifications. It's about training employees to be comfortable with change. I have a lot of scars on my knees from learning this the hard way because I'm fine with change. I love new technology. I feel very comfortable, but that is not the case for, I would say, 85% of my office. So the most important thing we have done is trying to continuously nurture the idea of reskilling as not being a one-time intervention, but instead a part of our continuous learning.
So we do that. Megan, I'm sorry for interrupting, but reskilling is occurring right now in your office through what mechanisms?
That's what I'm going to share. Two programs. One is an internal focus called Auditor Lab. That is a combination of training at basic levels all the way up to advanced for different technologies, different programs, apps, what have you. But more importantly, we have concerted effort to train critical thinking, helping people ask good questions. There's sandbox days where people can bring their biggest pain points. What I would say, what has helped people who have been very change adverse get comfortable, it's not the sexy stuff. It's about saying what eats up the most amount of your day. What do you dread doing? What task really, really drives you nuts? And maybe that's something that we can use agentic AI to help make your day better. That sandbox has given people permission to come with all kinds of ideas. And I highly recommend that to anyone who is listening.
Well, Howard, how you mentioned there's 52,000 water utilities in the United States, and that's just the United States. So how do you get these utilities, many of them very, very small, very, very backward technologically, into this? How do you upskill the people in these agencies so they can use the tools you're helping develop?
Well, it's interesting because when I think about AI, I think about the smart technologies that are out there today, and the technology companies that are out there today that are providing this equipment, and that it's really the AI is going to be integrated within that. So I think I believe that that people are going to learn as we progress, as new equipment comes out, and this equipment is made more available. That it'll be an evolution. So we're not talking about a revolution here. I absolutely agree with what I've heard Megan and Leigh talk about, which is very much like, what do you do today? Well, today you go and you figure out how to use whatever chat GBT that you prefer and become proficient at that. And we will grow as a society as things move forward. I'm not so sure about this whole movement away from the basic skills. I think as particularly in the water industry, when we look at the incredible savings that are going to happen in terms of efficiencies that are going to be produced, that we're going to be able to take that and use that money to invest into capital and new systems. And so I think all areas of the water business of everything we do, whether it's white collar or blue collar jobs, I think are only going to grow as a result of AI.
Let me jump off of that. The transformative potential, whether we think of it as evolution or revolution, it appears from all of your wonderful comments, and I'm going to turn to you, Tom, particularly, is potential for what ifs. So improving whole processes and taking today's knowledge, which is not integrated. So how do we use AI, and do we need to have some mechanism that goes beyond individual cities and states to learn from these what ifs? How do we change urban planning to take advantage and of this knowledge? And how do we use the knowledge if they're right now segmented in different cities, different silos? How do we bring it together? This is for everyone, including you, Megan, and Leigh, and Jonathan. But Tom, let's start with you.
Well, thanks for the easy question about how to change urban planning, Susan. And it's 3
And by the way,
steps.
We have 3 minutes to wrap up, so let's 50 seconds, okay, or less. Thank you. 30 seconds.
This is going to be I think a kind of a reshuffling of tasks, and hopefully kind of within whole organizations, about things like that you've been mentioning and the other panelists have been talking about kind of upskilling, training, kind of re-envisioning.
All of the above. All of the above.
All
okay.
the above. Re-envisioning our tasks.
Right.
So,
okay, final words for everyone. What's the next step? And is this revolutionary or evolutionary change ahead of us? Leigh?
It's revolutionary and get started.
Okay. Megan?
Revolutionary and baby steps.
Baby steps. Okay, well, take us to the revolution. Jonathan?
I might say evolutionary. I think things will probably be slower than people realize, but I think long run, a lot's going to change. Massive impacts in the long run.
I think that's our.
And I'll throw in my 2 cents. Our insurance company in my home just had us install a remote water leak sensor system that they're helping pay for. That tells that I'm sure is replicated at the utility level, because it will tell us about any leaks in the water system, and it measures this through sound, pressure, humidity levels. It all runs off a central server somewhere, which surrendering some privacy in return for some peace of mind. And we just installed an electric monitoring system that looks for electric faults, again at the behest of the insurance company. So we're seeing these AI type tools filtering down to the very local level.
Yes, so lots of current uses and much more to come. Bill, back to you to close us off.
Absolutely. So that's just about it for this edition of Special Briefing. Thank you so much to Susan Wachter for your great questions, and thank you to our fabulous panelists. You see them up on the screen there. If you want to get in touch with them, get in touch with us, or you can Google them. It's really easy to find them. Thank you to our production team, Megan Schmigdal, Amy Montgomery, Noah and Ritzenberg, Natalia Trujillo, and Divine Adenyi. And thanks, as always, to the Travelers Institute, Volcker Alliance, and members of the Penn IUR Advisory Board for your generous support. We'll be back. Susan and I will be back on Tuesday, December 16th, with Apollo Chief Economist Torsten Slok, kicking off a look ahead to the tremendous challenges facing the U.S. economy, states and localities, and the muni market in 2026. Details about that already on our websites. And so for now, I'm Bill Glasgall on behalf of Susan Wachter and the entire special briefing team. Have a great Thanksgiving, and we'll see you again in December.